It all starts with a hand reaching out toward the light as an eager soul celebrates that the long-awaited moment has finally arrived. The prota opens his eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling while feeling entirely new sensations throughout his body. He realizes that all his hard work paid off and that he has finally managed to reincarnate or possess a body in a fantasy world. In reality, this is Kim Sun-woo, an ordinary South Korean guy who spent his whole life preparing for this exact moment. To achieve this goal, he literally read every single book, novel, webtoon, and game he could find for years, just like I do to bring these stories to you guys. The guy simply dedicated his entire existence to analyzing every piece of media he loved in extreme detail. He used to write massive reviews with over 5,000 characters picking apart plot holes left by the authors. I do that too, by the way. His critiques were sharp and super detailed, pointing out flaws in world building and character development. He did this every single day without rest, always dissecting every story in a very thorough, deep way. Sun-woo memorized the plot, the universe rules, and even the maps showing the connections between every existing character. He knew the relationships between important figures by heart, right down to the exact locations of secret items and powerful relics. Of course, all that nitpicking and complaining made most authors just give up on writing altogether. He ended up getting blocked and mocked across multiple online communities, but in the end, all that obsession was worth it. After so much persistence, he finally managed to get transported into someone else's body in another dimension. Looking around, he finds himself in a humble medieval village filled with straw huts and windmills. Realizing he now has the body of a 4-year-old child, he decides it is a great time to open his status screen. He strikes a dramatic pose and yells for his status window, expecting the game system to pop up right before his eyes. Absolutely nothing happens, leaving him standing there looking totally silly. Ivan realizes this might not be one of those generic regression stories with RPG systems, but he does not lose heart. Since he has read hundreds of web novels, he knows full well that plenty of famous stories simply do not have status screens. Thinking on this, he decides to use his modern knowledge to invent some groundbreaking product and make a massive fortune. And just like that, the first week of his new life in the body of a 4-year-old child passes by. The kid discovers his new name is Ivan Petrovich and begins assessing the situation in his quiet little village. He learns that his new parents are extremely poor, uneducated farmers who do not even know the name of their own country. Trying to be an innovative genius, he attempts to make handmade soap, only to end up causing an explosive mess in the tub. Besides getting a good spanking from his mom, he discovers that soap had already been invented a long time ago in this world. My goodness, even I did not see that coming. Time flies, and he is already completing his 6th week of survival in this new reality. While heading into town to buy eggs, he catches sight of a few newspaper pages floating through the air and gets curious. Ivan is shocked to see printed newspapers, since that means society here is far more advanced than the typical Middle Ages. He begins mentally listing every novel he knows, crossing off the ones that clearly do not match his current reality. 15 weeks pass since he reincarnated, and he continues trying to unravel the mystery of this new world. The boy finally manages to uncover the name of the country he is living in, as well as the king who rules it all. With this new information, he rips up his entire list of candidate novels and tosses the scraps straight into the fireplace. Absolutely everything here is unfamiliar, from the name of the kingdom to the monarch and the neighboring lands surrounding the territory. Now his biggest question is no longer which story he ended up in, but rather what literary genre this crazy world actually belongs to. 4 years fly by, and now Ivan is an 8-year-old boy trying his best to adapt to daily farm life. Suddenly, the absolute worst happens with the terrible arrival of the Demon King and the start of a devastating war against humanity. His mother tries to calm him down, asking him to wait inside the house quietly and not worry about the noise outside. But reality hits hard when army officers break into their home to recruit new soldiers for the front lines. Ivan's father promises he will return safely, but he ends up being dragged away by force to the battlefield. From that tragic moment on, Kim Sun-woo's mind begins to drift, and his old identity slowly starts to fade away. 6 years pass since his reincarnation, and the young boy is now reaching 10 years of age. Ivan starts helping his mother with daily chores, learning to handle heavy farm labor with impressive skill. 2 more years pass in the boy's life as he keeps growing amid the simple routine of the countryside. He uses all his free time to study hard, eventually mastering the complex writing system of this world. Now, he is 14 years old, marking exactly 1 decade since he was transported here. An extremely heavy, gloomy atmosphere hangs over the tiny cabin where he lives with his mother. Terrible news reaches their home, officially informing them that his father has passed away on the battlefield. What makes it even weirder and more frustrating is that the official document reporting his passing was issued 2 full years ago. Holding the letter with anger, he realizes he does not understand anything anymore, wondering if this is some kind of military strategy game. Ivan begins processing how this bizarre world blends firearms, steam engines, magic, and knights right in the middle of a war. The boy is completely stunned and deep in thought, trying to figure out what kind of mess he truly landed in. Right in front of him, his new mother weeps, unable to accept the tragic news about her beloved husband. The poor woman breaks down in despair, asking how this could happen to their family while Ivan watches helplessly. Ivan tries to comfort his mother, telling her not to worry, and makes a huge decision the very next morning. The young man decides to enlist in the army to take on responsibility and protect his family's livelihood. He strikes a deal to receive an annual salary of 15 coins and requests that all the money be sent directly to his mother. He did not do this purely out of kindness, but out of pity for the woman who was dedicating her entire life and soul to raising him. On top of that, he felt immense guilt for occupying the body of her true son, who was her only pillar of support. Time moves quickly, and now he is 18 years old, accumulating 4 long years of mandatory military service. Ivan soon realizes his new body has a bizarre, far above average talent for fighting and actual physical combat. After securing several small victories, he stops being a mere recruit and joins the regular army ranks. But things go downhill when the front line gets crushed, and half of the Allied forces end up wiped out on the battlefield. It is precisely during this moment of pure desperation that the legendary hero appears to save the nation. Seeing that, Ivan finally deduces that the genre of this world must be one of those classic heroic RPG journeys. Hope returns with the arrival of this savior, but unfortunately, Ivan's front line continues to get mercilessly overwhelmed. A monstrous giant worm erupts from the ground, and Ivan's troops keep getting pushed back in humiliating fashion. Now, at 28 years old, he has built up an impressive 14 years of military service in a war that feels endless. The tide of battle begins to turn when the hero's party pulls off a precise ambush against the Demon King's generals. Thanks to his impressive record, Ivan gets assigned to serve right alongside the legendary hero's party. He is placed in the unit responsible for securing reclaimed territories and suppressing remaining enemies. To shorten that ridiculously long name, everyone simply referred to the group as the Cleanup Unit. This special combat squad cleaned up the mess whenever the hero defeated a general and the enemy camp collapsed. 2 more years pass, and now he is 30 years old, with 16 of those years dedicated entirely to the military. Finally, the hero's party manages to defeat the terrifying Demon King, bringing long-awaited peace to the world. Ivan decides to lay low and quietly wait for the end of the story so he can finally head back home. He ponders the thought that it is finally time to wake up and escape this nightmare of a medieval world. Now, at 32, he truly believed he was free to leave that terrible reality behind. 2 years pass since the Demon King's defeat, but nothing happens, and the story's final conclusion never comes. To make matters worse, his cleanup unit was slowly wiped out, leaving only 1/5 of the original soldiers alive. He keeps fighting bravely through the mud and chaos, unable to comprehend why he is still trapped in this place. Realizing his superiors want to disband the group, he is discharged from the army after completing one final extreme mission. That final assignment was brutal and intense, but he miraculously survived to tell the tale. At 34 years old, he continues to wait patiently for the conclusion of this seemingly endless epilogue. 10 years have passed since his beloved mother passed away, leaving him completely alone in this distant land. Carrying nothing but an old suitcase, he finally decides to return to the small village of his childhood. Ivan resolves to open an orphanage near the capital to shelter and care for children who lost their parents in the war. Yet even after so much time, dedication, and hard work, his situation remains exactly the same. The end credits simply refuse to roll, and he remains stuck managing the St. Vasilicia orphanage. Ivan is now a mature, bearded man who spends his days sighing in the quiet corners of his large private library. He begins writing in his journal, venting about how insanely much he misses his old life on Earth. The man even makes a list of Korean foods he misses so much he feels like he is going out of his mind. 4 years have already passed since the war ended, and he wonders if the victory condition is for the hero to pass away of old age. Suddenly, he hears heavy footsteps slowly approaching from the hallway outside his room. Ivan instantly goes on high alert at the suspicious movement. He recognizes the rhythm of the sound and prepares for the worst-case scenario. The friction of leather, the scent of gunpowder, and the steady pace of the steps reveal it is just a single, well-trained soldier. Without making a sound, Ivan draws a small combat hatchet he kept hidden for self-defense. The wooden door groans eerily, slowly swinging open right before the veteran's sharp eyes. To his surprise, a young soldier steps inside, saluting and cheerfully greeting him as veteran. Dmitri complains about the scare, saying the veteran should knock before pulling a weapon, while also poking fun at his messy beard. Ivan pays no mind to the complaints, dryly replying that it is strictly business. Dmitri pretends to be hurt by his friend's coldness and hands over an official letter bearing a very important royal seal. He urges Ivan to read the paper right away, explaining that it is a message sent by the princess herself. The veteran stares at the envelope suspiciously, as if it were laced with poison, but Dmitri tells him to stop being so paranoid. Ivan is quite surprised to realize the princess just wants to know how he has been doing lately. Now we must be getting to the interesting part of the story. He knows the famous iron-blooded princess would never send a personal letter just to make casual small talk. Dmitri explains that the situation in the kingdom is extremely tense, with military advisors begging for troop withdrawals. On top of that, Crown Prince Alexander is doing everything he can to carve the country into 5 pieces and sell it off abroad. To make things worse, the current king simply pretends nothing is wrong, maintaining total silence on the throne. But Dmitri reveals the true critical issue is the international university founded during the war years. He refers to the renowned St. Yansk Academy and asks if Ivan knows who the new students entering this year are. First on the list is none other than Isabel, the direct heir of the legendary hero Maximilian, who defeated evil. Then we have Oscar, the son of the famous knight Gilles de Rais, complete with his towering armor and massive lance. Next is the young elf Elfie Hera, daughter of the immensely powerful mage Bullgreen, who aided in the war effort, along with Essie, daughter of the berserker Einar, and the skilled Lucia, who is the disciple of the famous rogue Enrique. Basically, all the children of the great heroes are gathered under the guidance of Patricia, the saint from the hero's former party. Since the school does not care about age, the most promising prodigies from all over the world were sent there. Dmitri seriously explains that with so many heroes' children gathered together, the risk of one getting hurt is enormous. If even one of these influential kids ends up losing their life, the entire nation will be completely ruined beyond saving. That is why Ivan's mission is to act as a secret bodyguard to ensure everyone stays alive for the next 3 years. Ivan gets extremely annoyed thinking about how a typical hero's journey happy ending could turn into such a total mess. Instead of peace, he got international political intrigue, internal kingdom struggles, and an academy that popped up out of nowhere. Suddenly, a light bulb turns on in the prota's head as he realizes something terrifying. He asks for a quiet minute while trying to process the biggest plot twist of his entire life. In a sudden burst of frustration, the man stands up abruptly and slams his hand on the table, startling poor Dmitri. He lets out a proper curse out of pure annoyance. Ivan finally realizes that the bizarre story he landed in is actually a high school romance novel set in an academy. Dmitri asks in alarm if his superior is feeling okay after seeing such a sudden, intense reaction. The veteran feels outraged upon realizing he spent 30 long years fighting in terrible wars, only to discover it was all just the prologue. Ivan throws a punch so powerful it snaps the wooden coffee table clean in half as he makes a firm decision. He smiles, realizing that all he needs to do is make sure these spoiled kids graduate alive so he can finally leave. He accepts the job immediately, promising himself he will do whatever it takes to finally head back to Korea. In the letter, the princess affectionately asks how her trusted lumberjack has been doing over the past few months. She fondly recalls the time they spent tending the garden together and complains about him leaving without even looking back. She warns that winter is approaching again, and this time it will be much colder and quieter than the last. The poetic message continues, while a lovely pale hand gently touches a few green leaves in the royal garden. The princess makes it clear in her letter that she considers Ivan her most reliable and cherished lumberjack in the entire realm. She promises to return any favor he asks 3 times over, even offering her sincere friendship as a bonus. If all of that still is not enough to repay her debt of gratitude, she says she will pay with their memories. At the end, she reminds him that the kingdom still desperately needs his full devotion, just as it always has. She signs off warmly, and Ivan finishes reading, mentally summarizing all that royal romantic nonsense. The plan basically consists of making sure nobody gets hurt or passes away during the 3 academic years at the academy. The guy accepts that he will have to put up with 3 more years of high school drama if he wants to see the end, credits, and go home. He asks who the first kid to arrive will be, and Dmitri answers that it will be the daughter of the berserker from Drone. Ivan feels a shiver run down his spine, just remembering the name of that insane warrior who fought beside him in the past. Even though he is known today as the Great King Drone, he was one of the most dangerous fighters in the hero's party. The Proto remembers perfectly how that lunatic loved to scream wildly while spinning his massive axe around. He realizes that the first student arriving at the academy is none other than the daughter of that wild man. As the train whistle blows at the station, Ivan mentally prepares himself to deal with the first big problem of this new chapter. King Einar celebrates proudly, shouting that his heir will conquer absolutely everything, carrying the mighty blood of the berserkers. Esadisi gets annoyed by the taunt and tells everyone to watch closely as rumors spread that she is going to master orchestral music. The girl shouts in frustration, asking what the issue is with playing in an orchestra since she is the eldest daughter of the berserker. She makes a smug face and makes a grand entrance into the classical music department of the prestigious St. Jansk University. The Order of Knights throws a massive send-off for the young lady, and 2 days later, the train continues its journey through the icy mountains. But suddenly, the worst happens as a violent explosion causes the entire train to derail off the tracks in catastrophic fashion. Upon receiving the awful news, Ivan questions Dmitri, asking if he is absolutely certain about this sudden attack on the train. Ivan immediately sighs, realizing that all of this is happening simply because he is now stuck inside an academy story. He reflects that in standard fantasy tales, the hero defeats the Demon King with the help of his great, loyal companions. And even one of the evil generals ends up repenting and changing sides to fight alongside the forces of good. At the end of that long journey, peace finally returns to save the world, and everyone lives happily ever after. But all these easy, predictable rules are just cliché formulas that every cheap web novel author loves to use. He remembers perfectly well burning the papers containing those rules 30 years ago, yet he still recalls every single detail. And the main cliché of a magic school story is none other than a violent terrorist attack right on the incoming train. Knowing this, the veteran decides to wait calmly at the train station, reading the newspaper while preparing to take action. The clock strikes exactly 9 in the morning, indicating that the train carrying the young princess of Drone should arrive at any moment. If any group of terrorists were planning to attack the girl, they would definitely choose this deserted border station. Crossing the border shifts all blame onto the kingdom, and the region right after this station is a heavily guarded military zone. Since he had no real proof, he ended up not calling for backup, but he notices the security in the area is way too amateurish. Ivan begins walking slowly across the hall, using his sharp perception to spot the disguised suspects. He notices a guy in a jacket pretending to check the schedule, who has already let 3 trains pass without making a move. And the other guy selling vegetables in a deserted station like this is even more pathetic, casually smoking without a care. Without raising any suspicion, the veteran walks slowly, approaching from behind the man seated on the bench. The suspect senses an overwhelming presence drawing near and freezes completely in sheer terror, unable to move a muscle. Quickly and quietly, Ivan draws his pistol and points the weapon directly at the back of the frightened man's neck. The guy begins to tremble in fear, asking who he thinks he is to do something like that in the middle of a public station. But the veteran simply commands him to shut his mouth in a cold, sharp voice that sends chills down the man's spine. Seeing the scene, the other disguised accomplices panic, yelling at him to stop and not move a muscle. Ivan finds their reaction ridiculous, since his pistol should have been completely hidden from those men's line of sight. To confirm their betrayal beyond a shadow of a doubt, he asks directly who the man on the bench swears his ultimate loyalty to. The man begins to stammer nervously, unable to come up with a quick, convincing answer to the question. Without wasting a single second, Ivan pulls the trigger, taking the traitor down instantly and leaving a mess on the station wall. Gunshots begin echoing through the hall as the first enemy's body collapses lifeless onto the wooden floor. He concludes that if they were actual agents of the realm, they would have stated their affiliation immediately instead of hesitating like that. The remaining terrorists fall into total panic, frantically firing their weapons toward the Prota. Ivan notices their movements are slow and clumsy, proving they do not belong to the kingdom's elite military forces. He moves with superhuman speed, easily dodging every single bullet fired in his direction. In the blink of an eye, he lunges forward and slices the neck of one of the henchmen using his sharp combat hatchet. The veteran continues his relentless assault, rapidly closing in on the last armed enemy in the hall. He delivers a clean, brutal strike, taking out his targets without showing the slightest effort or hesitation. The problem with those amateur criminals was that they had never faced a true monster in actual combat. The last survivor falls to the ground, screaming in intense pain and despair upon realizing he violently lost his arm. Ivan looks down coldly at the man, warning him that if he does not stop the bleeding, he will pass away in under 3 minutes. With a terrifying expression, he demands to know the exact location of the rest of the terrorist group. The wounded man cries in total panic, revealing there are 15 more men on the tracks, begging for his life in exchange for cooperation. He promises to create a distraction against their boss, who is an absolute beast, and Ivan realizes they were just scouts. The man begs for mercy, promising to cooperate completely, and Ivan asks if he knows who is riding inside that train. He replies through sobs that he heard it was just a regular cargo train carrying gold and valuable goods. The criminal begs to be spared, swearing on his knees that he answered every question without telling a single lie. But the veteran turns back with a dark glare, stating that the man slipped a lie right into the middle of his answers. Ivan coldly replies that his lie was claiming he would be useful, cutting the terrorist's throat without a shred of remorse. The clock on the station wall moves quickly, and now it is exactly 9:53 in the morning. He begins cleaning up the entire crime scene, dragging the bodies away, remarking that 5 minutes is more than enough time for a professional. After disposing of all the corpses and wiping away the mess, the clock reads 9:58, leaving 2 minutes before the train arrives. The veteran calmly settles under the shade of a tree, whispering to himself that he still has plenty of time to spare. Meanwhile, inside the castle's royal chambers, the princess curiously asks her assistant about how Ivan has been doing. Dmitri reveals that the warrior suspects an attack on the train and was freakishly accurate regarding the exact day and location of the strike. The young lady questions if he might have a secret informant, but the young man replies there has been no sign of that over the past 4 years. Dmitri starts breaking into a nervous cold sweat at the princess's serious glare, timidly calling her name to break the ice. She ignores his nervousness and orders that every single step and action Ivan takes be recorded and brought directly to her in reports. Princess Elizaveta, known for being utterly ruthless, wants to personally analyze every detail of her warrior's daily routine. She reflects that during his last mission 4 years ago, he acted the exact same way, driven by absolute conviction based purely on speculation. The noblewoman mentions she can feel an unshakable resolve in his actions as the train continues its journey across the Grand Bridge. Out in the hills, one of the terrorists firmly grips an explosive detonator, stating with confidence that the trap is set. Ivan begins running through the snow, knowing full well the most common cliché rule in any self-respecting academy story. The rule states that an early train attack never actually manages to seriously harm the main prota or the core cast. That type of incident right before the entrance ceremony serves merely as the standard tutorial to kick off the novel's adventures. And since the tutorial is meant for readers to get used to the system, the veteran decides to leave the main fight to the hero. Knowing nothing of this, the bandit leader presses the red button on the detonator with force to initiate the planned assault. A massive explosion erupts along the tracks, and Ivan reveals he never had the slightest intention of stopping the train from derailing. He wants the main characters to shine in the tutorial while he takes the opportunity to handle his own business from the shadows. The bandits begin celebrating the blast, preparing to raid the cars while Ivan tries to identify the rival group. The veteran's plan is to uncover the identity of those scoundrels now so he can hunt down and eliminate every single one of them at the academy later. He wants to avoid open fights in front of crowds, focusing instead on gathering valuable intel while acting as a spy. His sole priority right now is to quietly erase any risk factor that could threaten the lives of the new students. He draws his black pistol and readies himself for combat, knowing this is the true operational style of his old squad. A massive column of black smoke begins rising into the sky, indicating the train crashed into the snow with tremendous force. The bandit leader starts laughing insanely, shouting that they are finally rich and going to take all the loot for themselves. He orders his men to melt down the royal seals and sell everything quickly on the black market to maximize their profit. But their celebration is cut short when a sudden gunshot echoes through the area, startling the crew. One of the mercenaries gets struck right between the eyes, dropping lifeless to the ground instantly before the shocked eyes of the others. Ivan thinks to himself that flinching and shaking at the sound of a single gunshot is a pathetic luxury only weak fighters indulge in. The group starts shouting frantically, asking who is shooting at them, while the veteran evaluates their amateurish reaction. The bandits' sheer panic proves that none of them possess the advanced skill required to predict bullet trajectories. Holding his pistol and his combat hatchet, Ivan walks calmly toward the criminals, asking who the leader of the group is. The terrorist boss is startled by the intruder's nerve and orders all his men to shoot, to kill immediately. But at that exact instant, Ivan's blue eyes glow brightly as he activates his special combat perception technique. This incredible ability allows him to perfectly visualize the exact trajectory line of every weapon pointed his way. Standard firearms simply do not work against elite warriors because they can sense the incoming lethal intent. That bloodlust coats both the weapon itself and the fired projectile, making it easy for the defender to dodge. Concealing lethal intent in melee weapons is easy using mana, but doing so with high-speed projectiles is nearly impossible. For that reason, none of the legendary warriors in the hero's party used firearms, but Ivan's unit was different. As an exception to standard combat rules, every member of his old cleanup squad carried a pistol in their holster. They used rapid shots to gauge an opponent's strength level and quickly eliminate weaker adversaries. The veteran advances relentlessly, firing precise shots straight into the foreheads of each amateur criminal in the area. The brute of the gang loses his cool and charges at Ivan holding a knife, roaring in pure rage and desperation. He tries to land several rapid knife strikes, asking who sent that miserable dog to attack their group. But Ivan blocks the attack with utmost ease, landing a clean strike right in the center of the enemy leader's chest. He grabs his opponent's arm with force, using his immense physical power to slam him brutally onto the ground. The bandit leader slams his back against a rock, creating a small crater in the snow as Ivan points his gun at his forehead. The gang boss tries to get up, but he is completely immobilized after taking such a beating from our bearded hero. He shouts angrily that he memorized Ivan's face, but the veteran just sarcastically asks if he is really that good at remembering faces. Ivan terrifyingly remarks that such a thing is great luck, staring down at the man lying on the cold forest floor. The villain trembles in fear, while the prota deduces that this guy must be the tutorial boss of the Academy romance novel. Since this boss's destiny is to be defeated by the main hero, Ivan decides not to take his life, but that does not mean he is going to be nice about it. Gripping his combat hatchet, he orders the bandit to answer everything fast, warning him that he knows 1,000 ways to interrogate someone without causing them to pass away. Meanwhile, in the land of the berserkers, young Esidisi shouts at the top of her lungs that no one better dare follow her on her trip. She threatens to disown anyone who attempts to follow her, even if it is for a single second along the way to school. The girl storms off annoyed, carrying her violin case, leaving King Einar completely bewildered and sweating cold in the room. But suddenly, the king gets a brilliant idea, realizing everything is fine as long as she simply does not figure out she is being followed. With that in mind, he summons all his strongest berserker warriors for an extremely important meeting at the palace. He shouts, demanding to know which of those giant brutes would be capable of watching over and protecting his daughter without getting spotted. All the muscular men yell at the same time, accepting the mission to guard the young heiress with all their strength. These men, who in the past were known as a band of bloodthirsty lunatics, are now treated like brothers by King Einar. The king ponders that the girl knows every single one of their faces, and that she would recognize them on the train even if they wore silly disguises. Because of that, he asks which of them has the physical capacity to chase the train on foot using their own 2 legs. 3 giants step up instantly, yelling that they would do anything without asking for a single reward, purely out of loyalty to the king. In the realm of drone, these elite warriors and fiercely loyal bodyguards are known as housecarls. Einar thinks it is fantastic and says he now needs to choose one of them to take the university entrance exam to protect his beloved daughter. He asks for a show of hands from anyone who feels absolute confidence in passing a written test for the renowned academy. Total silence fills the room, and the giants start breaking into a cold sweat, saying that taking a written test is worse than facing death itself. But to everyone's surprise, a muscular arm covered in tattoos raises up from the middle of the crowd, accepting the challenge. The brave warrior is Mord Eriksson, a highly dedicated housecarl who steps up for the feared test of intelligence. The king cries tears of emotion seeing his brother's sacrifice, while the others try to comfort him, saying the test cannot be that hard. Einar shouts excitedly, officially appointing his brother as the newest freshman in the physical education department at St. Yansk Academy. Mord shouts back, confirming the order with all his energy, swearing he will protect his beloved niece's life to the very end. And so, 2 months ago, this quiet and mysterious man successfully managed to infiltrate the university campus. To everyone's surprise, he managed to pass the test and was admitted with honors into the physical education program at the prestigious institution. Of course, his score on the written portion was the absolute bare minimum possible, considering he failed even basic addition problems. The examiners and faculty board were left completely dumbfounded by the sheer lack of academic skill from the muscular giant. But he was admitted because he shattered literally every historical record possible during the practical, physical evaluation. After all, he is a true, relentless berserker warrior, and time moves quickly up until a cold day in the month of January. Mord literally ran behind the train for 2 days straight without stopping to rest or sleep a single time. The giant runs frantically through the snow, screaming for his niece to wait while cursing the bandits who dared lay a finger on her. Back at the wrecked train, young Esadisi begins to regain consciousness amidst the smoke and debris of the car. She groans from pain all over her body, completely unable to make sense of what just happened to the train cars. The girl's heart sinks as she realizes the train was likely targeted in a violent attack by highway bandits. She falls into utter panic, remembering she traveled all alone without any bodyguards because she threatened to disown anyone who followed her. Suddenly, she spots her black case lying amidst the rubble and lets out a gasp of surprise, rushing over to grab it. Esadisi hugs the violin in relief, thankful that it did not break in the crash, since music is her ultimate passion. But her joy is short-lived when she hears heavy bootsteps and suspicious noises outside her compartment. The car door is violently kicked open, making the young girl scream in terror and huddle in the corner. She tries to stammer out a few trembling words of fear while hiding her precious violin behind her body. A sinister, mocking laugh echoes through the smoke of the destroyed car, revealing the threatening silhouette of armed men. 3 mercenaries storm the room holding knives, laughing at the defenseless girl while she shakes in fear, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, out in the forest, the terrorist leader begs in agony, asking Ivan to just put him out of his misery. But the veteran coldly states that he is definitely not passing away today, stepping heavily on the injured man's chest in the snow. Ivan approaches with a cold glare, telling the bandit to stop talking nonsense about passing away. An ear-splitting cry of pain echoes through the forest as the prota begins interrogating the villain to get some answers. Ivan starts pouring a green healing potion onto the man's wound, just to keep him alive and, continue the questioning. The bandit screams frantically as the green liquid takes effect, mending his severe injuries at lightning speed. Ivan recalls that what frontline soldiers hate most in the world is not bad rations, but healing potions. The villain yells, begging the veteran to just sever his arm once and for all, instead of continuing to pour that insanely painful liquid on him. In the past, medics used to say Ivan's body was a national treasure while applying that very same painful potion to him. Young Ivan used to yell in protest, asking who on earth treats a national treasure with so much roughness and lack of care. Ever since that agonizing experience, he promised himself he would do whatever it took to avoid suffering any severe injuries in life. That cursed potion condenses all the pain of a long recovery into a matter of seconds, feeling like a super harsh antiseptic from a pharmacy. But after testing the pain on his own skin, Ivan discovered a brand new, perfect use for the potion during military interrogations. The method consists of healing with the potion, interrogating brutally, and then healing again in an endless loop of pure agony. This proved to be the most effective truth serum in the world, making the bandit beg for an end to it and confess absolutely everything he knows. Ivan says he needs to stay alive, concluding the man must be the tutorial boss, and there is no real reason to end his life. He carries the man on his back toward the tracks, but realizes he is just a low-level henchman who does not even know who planned the attack. The veteran suspects the orchestrators placed a mental block spell on the henchman's head to erase his memories. Suddenly, Ivan's combat perception triggers, revealing a new, dangerous trajectory line emerging from the middle of the forest. He tries to track where the enemy is aiming on his body and realizes the target is not his chest, but his entire face. A massive, destructive boulder is hurled with extreme violence directly toward our bearded prota's head. Ivan dodges the attack at the very last second, leaping to the side as the rock explodes with force, shattering the snowy ground. He realizes that using firearms against an opponent of this caliber is completely useless and prepares for hand-to-hand combat. The veteran notes that launching a stone of that size at such speed proves the enemy is far stronger than expected. A massive cloud of dust and debris rises into the air, temporarily obscuring the view of the entire clearing around the tracks. Everything gets covered in dense fog while the mysterious attacker awaits the outcome of his initial violent strike. Ivan walks calmly out of the smoke, deducing that his opponent also possesses the ability to read targeting lines in battle. With an extremely serious and intimidating gaze, the prota coldly orders the hidden enemy to step out of his hiding spot at once. Firm footsteps begin echoing through the snow, revealing leather boots and a red aura of raw power slowly approaching him. The newcomer praises Ivan's toughness, but warns that making a mistake like that can cost a veteran dearly. The muscular giant states it was supreme foolishness to dare lay a hand on his beloved niece, and that he will pay heavily for that nerve. Ivan looks back and realizes his mistake, noticing the henchman from earlier was not the tutorial boss, but the girl's wild uncle. The veteran draws his 2 combat hatchets, preparing to face the true leader of that overwhelming force. He hopes the giant knows some useful information as he assumes his strongest, most focused defensive stance. Mord lets out a wild battle cry and charges at Ivan, swinging his massive axe with brutal, destructive force. The weapons collide with absurd violence, generating a shockwave that cracks and shakes the ground beneath both warriors. The red-haired giant's eyes widen, sensing an immense shock at the unbelievable strength of his bearded opponent. Mord quickly realizes the man dressed in black is exceptionally strong, and that this fight will be far from easy to win. Ivan spins his hatchets with supreme mastery, blocking and deflecting every heavy strike launched by the berserker. Sparks fly as they exchange blows at high speed, and the veteran wonders if his predictions about the tutorial were wrong. Mord attacks furiously, asking how a simple highway robber could possess such refined and lethal combat skills. The giant suspects there might be a much greater force operating in the shadows, pulling the strings behind this entire attack. The brutal clash of their blades creates a blinding flash, temporarily dazzling anyone trying to watch the duel up close. Ivan worries, remembering that Princess Esidisi is one of the main leads and that his duty is to ensure she makes it out alive. At the same time, Mord yells frantically for his beloved niece's safety, trying everything to break through the veteran's defense. He screams that he needs to save the girl no matter what, executing a downward strike in an attempt to crush his opponent. While the main battle continues to heat up outside, chaos spreads inside the train's wrecked cars. Cornered by the mercenaries, young Esidisi begins crying in fear, desperately begging them to stay away from her. The bandits laugh mockingly, saying they thought she was just a regular survivor, but turns out she is a valuable prize. One of the henchmen tries to step forward to grab her by force, but the berserker girl conceals something in her hands with a look of sheer desperation. Suddenly, the girl loses her composure and apologizes to her beloved violin before using it as an improvised war club. With a devastating swing, she crushes the enemy's head, sending him flying and smashing through the car's wooden frame. The other mercenaries stand completely stunned, mouths agape, witnessing the sheer, absurd brute force of that seemingly helpless girl. Holding her cracked violin, Esidisi's hands begin trembling out of pure rage as she glares at the survivors with utter hatred. Crying in fury, she screams that they ruined her precious instrument and charges forward, calling the bandits complete lunatics. After all, she carries the furious blood of her father, who was widely known during the war as Einar the Slicer. Esidisi looks sadly at her broken violin, saying it was an absolutely magnificent musical companion. The mercenaries inside the car fall into total panic, screaming for everyone to run away as fast as possible before it is too late. The berserker heiress raises the remains of her cherished violin, preparing to unleash her full wrath upon the intruders. She vows to avenge her broken instrument, marking the birth of the most dangerous music student on the entire planet. Outside, Ivan hears a desperate cry for help as one of the mercenaries gets hurled clean out of the car. The poor guy's body flies through the air, landing headfirst in the snow after taking a crushing blow from the enraged girl. The remaining bandits flee, screaming that she has lost her mind, interrupting the duel between Ivan and the Red Giant. Both stop fighting instantly, shouting in concern, asking what happened to the red-haired girl inside the train. Ivan finally realizes his terrible misunderstanding, noting that the henchman he was interrogating earlier was not the mission target. He recalls the classic cliché stating that the main prota never passes away during a train attack because a helper always shows up to save the day. Mord asks angrily if Ivan was in league with the terrorists, since he saw him healing one of the henchmen with a potion earlier. The veteran defends himself, stating that it is all just a huge misunderstanding and that he would never assist those amateur bandits. Ivan explains that using that painful potion is just a standard interrogation technique his former unit used to practice. The warrior from Drone lets out a genuine laugh, saying he should have explained that minor torture detail right at the start of the conversation. Suddenly, Mord hears a noise coming from the smoke, and his eyes widen as he senses an extraordinarily powerful presence approaching. Acidice emerges unharmed from the rubble, her eyes glowing with pure fury while carrying the remains of her broken violin. The giant runs over, relieved to see his beloved niece safe and sound, while she is surprised to run into her uncle at the scene. Ivan observes from a distance, remembering clearly that the last time he saw little Acidice was about 7 years ago. Back then, she was just a sweet, cute little girl who would run happily to hug her berserker uncle after battles. He ponders that she might still remember him, but since the target is safe and has a great protector, he decides it is time to leave. The veteran knows that revealing his true identity right now would cause massive political headaches, and the girl senses something odd. Ivan vanishes silently into the forest, while the young girl asks if there was not someone else standing there with her uncle just a moment ago. Mord remains lost in thought in total silence, trying to process everything he witnessed during the duel against the mysterious warrior in black. He realizes the hatchet-fighting style used by the man in black is an exact match for Krasilov's special forces. The giant notes that the way he wielded the axe was eerily familiar, resembling King Einar's legendary combat style. Piecing all the clues together, he deduces there is only one living person capable of fighting like that, and that man is the missing hero, Ivan Petrovich. He asks the girl if she remembers a man named Ivan, and her face lights up with joy, confirming that she does. She says he was an incredibly good, kind, and super cool man, though her uncle severely doubts that last part regarding his style. Mord comments sadly that he heard the hero passed away 2 years ago, and the young girl laments, saying she would not even recognize him with that beard. Far away, Ivan lets out a long, thoughtful sigh as he walks alone back to the safety of his home under the dusk light. The veteran mentally complains that the workday was way too exhausting compared to the practically non-existent pay he is getting for it. He receives a report confirming the first mission was an absolute success, and that the safety of Drone's heiress is guaranteed. The scene cuts to St. Vasilisa Orphanage, with its massive stone bell tower shining under the clear morning sky the next day. Sitting in his office, Ivan reviews documents regarding the next important student scheduled to arrive in the capital in the coming weeks. He reads about the daughter of the hero Maximilien and the son of the knight Gilbert, realizing the distance is short and there is nothing to worry about. Furthermore, the mage's daughter will arrive by airship, and Enrique's disciple is already in the capital, making the protection detail much easier. Exhausted, the man rests his head on the desk, thinking that if he stops 2 more train attacks, the terrible tutorial will finally come to an end. He bites the cap of his fountain pen, sighing in boredom, and decides to write in his journal about his deepest desires. The veteran makes a list of all the foods he wants to devour once he gets back to Earth, writing kimchi jjigae in bold letters, but he quickly crosses it out and writes tteokbokki with total enthusiasm, realizing those spicy rice cakes are even better. He stresses that he does not want anything gourmet or from famous chains, but rather that classic, delicious school cafeteria style. The guy complains lazily, saying he just wants to go home, when a mysterious voice asks if he is going to abandon them again. The veteran gets a massive shock and whips his head around quickly, eyes wide with surprise upon hearing that familiar voice. He finds 17-year-old Priscilla smiling mischievously, saying she heard him grumbling about food right from the start. Ivan is quite puzzled by the girl's sudden appearance and asks how on earth she managed to climb up there without making a sound. She replies with a laugh that she studies hard, and that scaling the wall up to the 3rd floor of the orphanage is just part of her daily routine. The orphanage director tells her to use the hallway next time because it is dangerous, but she celebrates, saying she won his challenge. In truth, there is a very old and famous traditional game played by all the children at Vasilisa Orphanage. The rule of the game is to successfully sneak up to the director's office and catch him by surprise without him noticing their presence in the hall. Ivan was the type of mysterious man who caught everyone's attention due to his unique style and rather peculiar skills. He could react to any type of sudden surprise, and even the smallest sign of danger put the hero on maximum alert. The guy could catch objects thrown from behind his back without even looking, leaving the kids completely blown away. And to top it off, he was also a master at finding any child hiding during hide-and-seek on his very first attempt. But beyond that incredible, flawless tracking ability, there was something far more intimidating about his striking presence. He would simply pop up out of nowhere right behind the little ones, startling anyone who dared try to hide from him. Despite his stern look, he was super gentle and loved being the perfect playtime buddy for the orphans there. Ivan thought that if those kids got sharp enough to trick his senses, they would be ready to face the real world. That way, they could manage on their own in the future, and there were only 2 weeks left before the next group boarded that train. Until that departure day finally arrived, he was going to enjoy a well-deserved, wonderful period of absolute peace and quiet. Well, or at least that is exactly what the poor guy thought before seeing his relaxation plans go completely down the drain. That was because young Priscilla ended up getting kidnapped by henchmen, trying every trick to figure out who her boss was. The kidnappers were frustrated because the girl could conceal her presence perfectly, just like a professional ghost. When they asked who this orphanage director was, she proudly answered that it was the legendary Ivan Petrovich. Upon hearing that name, the two criminals froze in terror, breaking into an instant cold sweat. They desperately tried to deny it, saying they had never heard of him, but the sheer panic on their faces gave away the truth. One of them even tried to joke that Ivan Petrovich is the most common name in the kingdom to hide his fear of passing away. However, their panic is cut short when a mysterious female voice echoes from the shadows of the hideout. The dark figure ominously asks who they were talking about, and the room's atmosphere suddenly grows heavy. With eyes filled with tears, poor Priscilla stammers, confirming she was talking about her beloved director. The mysterious woman releases an overwhelming red aura, showing she knows the former war hero all too well. Meanwhile, in his office, Ivan himself receives the terrible news that one of his orphans has been taken. The local nuns panic, informing him about Priscilla's abduction, and he says he remembers her clearly. Ivan examines the clothes left behind and spots a black cross-shaped mark belonging to a very unpleasant individual. He realizes she is precisely the person he least wanted to meet again in his life, but he has no choice but to take action. The hero understands this is basically an unrefusable summons coming directly from his powerful former master. After all, that woman was the mastermind behind the creation of the terrifying cleanup squad he used to serve in. The Proto remembers that bold woman had stated she was going to retire from her shadowy activities. But it seems she was lying and decided to form a secret group of assassins under the code name Shadow Blade Enrique. To rescue the girl, even infiltrates the city's underground sewers, the only place her hideout could possibly be hidden. The veteran is so efficient, it takes him less than 3 hours to locate the secret lair, despite it being his first time there. He recalls that in the capital's center, there were several important monuments, including the famous statue of the nameless hero. But shortly after the war against the Demon King ended, that statue simply vanished, leaving the public confused. Nobody cared too much about the theft because they knew only a member of the hero's former party would have the nerve to pull that off. The culprit was Enrique, who left a wooden sign saying that mourning the fallen was entirely her right. Upon finding the statue in the sewer, Ivan understands his master did this for the same reason that caused the disbandment of the cleanup squad. He approaches the stolen monument, noticing a mysterious inscription carved right into the stone base. The message reads that even if their names are forgotten, the glory of all the fallen will remain immortal forever. Before that sincere tribute to his former brothers in arms, the veteran bows his head as a sign of respect. The inscription continues, asking that no one weep for those who departed first from this cruel world. After all, the warrior in black knows that soon enough he will be marching in the exact same line alongside all of them. Suddenly, a loud grinding sound of gears echoes through the place, and the stone floor begins to split open right before him. A secret underground passage reveals itself right beneath the statue, showing the path to the true hideout. Ivan is surprised by the hidden mechanism and decides to enter without hesitation to settle scores with his former boss. He enters a luxurious, well-lit hall where an elegant person calmly awaits him while sipping tea. The Proto maintains his usual serious posture, noticing she still remembers him very well after all this time. He asks if this is truly the first time the two of them are facing each other face to face after 7 long years apart. The beautiful woman gives a subtle smile, calling the man Little Ivan, revealing her true identity as Enrique. She is a legendary vampire who betrayed her creator 100 years ago and eliminated the monster threat by working as a professional assassin. On top of that, she was the brilliant mind behind the creation of the cleanup unit and the master of Ivan's entire life. The traitor Enrique stares at the young man with a provocative smile, commenting that he has not taken a single sip of his coffee yet. Ivan coldly replies that he does not mind, adding that in his homeland, people usually drink their coffee iced anyway. Getting straight to the point, the man asks about Priscilla's whereabouts, and the villain finds his direct attitude amusing. She asks him not to show so much hostility right off the bat and to relax a bit during this chat between old friends. Enrique displays a cynical smile, showing off her sharp fangs, stating that all this aggression gives him a sloppy posture. Sensing danger, the prota goes on high alert, his hand subtly drifting toward the handle of his trusty weapon. The villain stares at him with her red eyes, asking if he forgot that hostility is an exclusive trait of prey. She reassures him the little girl is safe and that she has not bitten her yet, releasing a terrifying red magic smoke into the room. Ivan feels an overwhelming lethal intent coming from the woman as the smoke takes the form of a giant serpent, sweating cold under the massive physical pressure. She demands the man change the subject and answer her questions first. The gigantic red snake hovers intimidatingly while the villain questions what he is secretly planning. Enrique grows completely furious, demanding to know the real reason behind recruiting so many war orphans. She thought to herself that the idea of him adopting kids after retirement was cute, but things had gotten out of hand. To her, sending a perfect infiltrator right to her doorstep felt like a provocation that he was going to teach assassination classes nearby. With crossed arms, she stares at her former partner sternly, asking if that bold attitude is a declaration of war. The vampire keeps her intense, piercing gaze locked on the guy, waiting for a convincing answer that might change her judgment. She makes a rather comical, pouting expression, grumbling that she is deeply hurt by his recent actions. The villain also critiques Ivan's massive, ugly beard, questioning why he is sporting something that went out of style a century ago. Meanwhile, Ivan just wants to resolve everything peacefully without starting an unnecessary brawl in the hideout. The prota remains lost in thought, trying to decide how much information he should actually disclose to that suspicious woman. He recalls that the kingdom of Krasilov seemed peaceful on the surface, but was completely fractured by a fierce power struggle. On one side was the crown prince, who wanted to expand the empire through war, and on the other was the princess, seeking internal peace. To prevent a conflict, the princess secretly reactivated former agents to safeguard key students at the academy, and that secret agent was none other than Ivan himself, who now finds himself facing a major dilemma regarding Enrique's true motives. He knows his master is aware of his mission, so he wonders why she wants details and whether she is still on the princess's side. A terrifying thought crosses the hero's mind as he considers if that dangerous woman decided to align herself with the warrior prince. The tension between the two legendary fighters reaches its peak, and the room gets engulfed in a clash of blue and red auras. Ivan tries to calm things down through dialogue, mentioning he heard she is training a new disciple for the academy. Enrique listens suspiciously, letting out a soft, defiant sigh, waiting to see where he is going with this topic. The hero says his client took an interest in the girl and that it would be a huge loss for the nation if something bad happened to her. He explains that he received the mission to handle the girl's security, hoping the villain gets the hint provided she is not a traitor. Except that inside Enrique's head, those words sounded like a direct threat that he was going to hunt down and eliminate her beloved disciple. Thinking the guy had finally grasped the situation, he starts to stand up, but the villain slams her hand on the table in a fury, believing she is the target. Completely enraged, she yells for Lucia, ordering her young disciple to enter the meeting room immediately. The door suddenly swings open, with the girl cheerfully responding to her master's call with full enthusiasm and energy. Enrique introduces the new apprentice to Ivan, while the young girl bows politely, mentioning she has heard a lot about him. Ivan notices the girl is an ordinary human and asks in a sarcastic tone if she is aware of her boss's true race. With an innocent smile, young Lucia confidently replies that her dear master is indeed an exemplary human being. She praises her master, saying she is a heroine who protects the kingdom and that someone's race is defined solely by their humanity. The war veteran is left completely speechless, letting out only a stunned murmur at such an adorable response. He reflects on how open and pure the young girl's mind is in a kingdom that typically despises any non-human race. Enrique gets emotional hearing those sweet words, thinking that girl is the most precious gift she received in her old age. Overcome with strong determination, the vampire activates her aura of red flames again, shouting that she would rather not eliminate him. Seeing that diplomacy has failed, the prota draws his sharp hatchet from beneath his trench coat, ready for a physical clash. Ivan states that if she really allied with the enemy side, he will have to put past memories aside to punish the betrayal. He charges at his opponent, asking what price she charged the traitor prince to sell herself out like that. Enrique gets totally confused by the accusation, asking in surprise if it had not been Ivan himself who allied with the prince. The hero halts his attack instantly, stating with a puzzled look that he has never even met that fake smiling man in his entire life. A deadly, extremely awkward silence consumes the entire hall as both fighters try to figure out the confusion. The two stand there staring at each other blankly, realizing they fought for nothing over a massive, silly misunderstanding. Enrique complains that talking to Ivan is always exhausting, questioning why God did not grant him a single drop of eloquence. Young Lucia cheerfully comments that she thinks the two of them make a lovely couple, leaving her master completely furious and blushing red. Faced with this entire awkward situation, the veteran sits down exhausted, thinking he deserved overtime pay from the princess. Regardless, he decides to ignore their craziness and takes a sip of coffee, relieved to have resolved this huge issue. He knows that even if the tutorial progresses, Enrique's disciple will be safe, since the vampire master herself will protect her. Lucia admires her mentor's absurd strength, while Enrique just waves her hand, pretending it was no big deal. Seeing that the two seem more like mother and daughter than master and student, Ivan concludes that the family meeting ended safely. She asks why he taught ambush techniques to the orphans, and the man swears they learned everything on their own while looking for jobs. After clearing up the confusion, Ivan walks back alongside Priscilla, realizing the hideout was quite far from his orphanage. The director wonders what on earth the girl was doing so far from home to catch the attention of the feared vampire's henchmen. Walking under the beautiful dusk light, young Priscilla breaks the silence, timidly calling out to her dear protector. With eyes full of tears, she asks if he happens to be preparing to leave and abandon them for good. He recalls that the frequent visits from government agents and his secret outings have been leaving the orphanage empty lately. Ivan wonders if his travel wish list ended up making the girl believe he was going to vanish forever from their lives. But he soon realizes the real reason for all that sudden concern might be something much simpler and deeper. The veteran mentally admits he might have let his desire to depart for another world in the future show a bit too much. Priscilla is extremely startled by his silence, her eyes widening in fear of having her suspicions confirmed. The girl begins crying frantically, begging the director not to leave them alone in this cruel and lonely world. The man realizes that as a war orphan, she felt terrified of losing the only safe shelter she had to live in peace. That was why she ran into town to find a job, only to be mistaken for an elite spy by criminals. Touched, the prota gently places his coat over her head while the girl asks where he is going. The guy confesses in his thoughts that he truly wishes to depart, but knows he still has an important mission to fulfill. However, he knows his current journey is quite different, and that he needs to face reality responsibly. He reveals he is going to St. Yansk University, but promises he will visit frequently to check on them. Priscilla finally lets out a lovely smile of relief, wiping away her tears upon realizing she will not be abandoned by him. The man reflects that he put way too much effort into building that orphanage, and that it would take at least 3 years to leave for good. Knowing that the entrance exam for the famous university is insanely tough, the kids begin preparing intensely. With a playful smile, Priscilla remarks that if they pass the test, they will be able to see the director again in just 1 year. She gathers all the orphans, warning them that the rules of the game remain the same as before and that they must do everything in total secret. The blonde girl reinforces that the advanced study plan must be executed without the director suspecting a single thing. She declares that the group that manages to get admitted into the prestigious college will be the ultimate winner of their internal contest. Thus, all the orphans enter an intense study routine, while Ivan in his office thinks everything is going perfectly smoothly. The first mission to protect Esidisi, the daughter of the feared berserker from the hero's former party, was completed with absolute success. The second task of ensuring the safety of Lucia, the young disciple of the vampire Enrique, was also finalized flawlessly. Now, the experienced prota mentally prepares himself to face the next challenge about to begin in the kingdom. The scene focuses on a massive steam train speeding across the plains, releasing a thick trail of black smoke into the sky. Inside one of the cars, a gorgeous and mysterious silver sword with shining details rests quietly on the table. The next key target who just boarded the train is young Isabel, who travels lost in thought while watching the scenery through the window. She is the proud heir of the legendary hero, carrying a massive responsibility regarding her family's future. The narrative explains that the former party of heroes was fundamentally a cleanup squad operating in the dead of night. They needed to infiltrate deep into demon territory to assassinate the most dangerous commanders of that army. For their plans to succeed and humanity to win the war, every single step they took had to be extremely silent. Back then, the proud, white-haired young hero led the charges, smiling confidently in the face of imminent danger. However, he displayed completely reckless behavior during combat, leaving his companions in total panic. The vampire used to complain that he fought, making so much noise it felt like he was shouting their location to every enemy around. She would look back outraged by the warrior's lack of stealth, while he just agreed in a super sarcastic way. To make matters worse, the knight in shining armor also charged forward, shouting that he was not going to lose that contest under any circumstances. The two brutes created massive explosions of magic energy, leaving the poor elf shocked by such total madness. After the clash, the warrior Gilbert showed off his broken fist proudly for having defeated more enemies during that warm-up. The party's cleric would get annoyed having to waste his precious healing magic to fix the foolish mistakes of those two idiots. The giant king Einar lets out one of his classic loud, boisterous laughs, showing he is ready to start trouble. He flexes his muscles, shouting that the men of his homeland were born to leave their mark on the world, while his partners beg him to stop. Under the beautiful starry night, the sacred mountain rises majestically, ignoring the complete lunacy of that group of warriors. Suddenly, a colossal sword slash rips through the sky, splitting the top of that immense stone mountain in half with a deafening crash. With the destruction of the mountain, an endless horde of furious monsters and dragons begins pouring out of the sight like a swarm of angry wasps. Ivan remembers perfectly what an absolute nightmare it was, having to run for his life from that relentless army of demonic beasts. A star shines brightly in the clear sky, marking the beginning of yet another wild stunt by the legendary party of heroes. The guy points his gauntleted hand toward the stellar glow, recalling the incredible feats of that formidable man. Maximilian was the type of warrior who would literally slice through the sky with his sword just because he thought it was fun. The warriors begin competing among themselves to see who managed to cause the most destruction and split the biggest obstacle in their path. They engage in an intellectual debate over which display of physical destruction was the most impressive of the night. In truth, that group of legendary heroes was nothing more than a bunch of wild lunatics, and the hero was the absolute worst of them all. Despite all his obvious craziness, that charismatic man was also the warrior who shone brightest in combat. Ivan recalls that the crazy hero took the risk of alerting the entire enemy army by slicing the sky for no actual reason. Later, he confessed with a smile that he only did it because he wanted to see the stars, and because of such silliness, the guy never really liked him. That legendary hero defeated the Demon King 4 years ago, but vanished off the map right after, severing all contact with civilization. Even with the world still remembering the legend of the Savior, everyone seems to be forgetting the real human named Maximilian. Back in the present, inside the passenger car, a young disguised officer in a suit asks if something is bothering the Prota. Ivan glares at the rookie agents with his most intimidating stare, stating that their very presence there is what bothers him most right now. He lets out a long, frustrated sigh, realizing he just walked into yet another extremely annoying and problematic situation. Ivan recalls that after stopping the terrorist attack, Dmitri was shocked by the precision of his information regarding the location and time of the crime. The young soldier would not stop gesturing in surprise, wanting to understand how a retired veteran knew so much about the enemy's plans. Because of that, he ended up raising suspicion, and Dmitri offered a team of 5 intelligence agents to provide support on the mission. It was an obvious reaction. After all, a man retired for 4 years accurately predicted an attack against important figures in the realm. He predicted everything using romance cliches, but to Dmitri, it looked like the Prota was leading a global secret organization. Without giving actual explanations, Ivan chose to maintain his mysterious silence, knowing that a man's true power lies in mystery. As a result of that mysterious attitude, the train now travels at high speed toward its next key destination. The hero ended up receiving the unwanted help of 5 clumsy rookie spies who were obviously there just to keep an eye on him. Running out of patience, he decides to lecture them, questioning why secret agents are wearing identical black suits on a mission. He complains that with so many empty seats in the car, the guys crammed themselves into the exact same corner, drawing everyone's attention. Ivan says it is impossible to retire in peace with such amateur spies around, calling them incompetent rookies and leaving them sweating cold. The veteran releases an intimidating aura and begins telling stories from his youth to teach them an unforgettable lesson. The train releases a massive cloud of black smoke as the journey continues under the sound of the prota's endless scolding. The iron wheels screech loudly on the tracks, signaling that the transport has finally arrived at its destination at the city station. The exhausted agents bid farewell to the hero in an extremely formal manner, saying they will follow his instructions to the letter. He yells that they still act like amateurs and gives more harsh advice, remembering his bloody days in the cleanup unit. The spies flee crying, complaining that the prota is a chatterbox monster who talked for 18 hours straight without stopping. The veteran watches the group of grown men running away frantically, feeling relieved that he finally managed to get rid of them. Ivan used the lecture as an excuse to dismiss the guards, ordering them all to go protect the son of the legendary Knight Gilbert. The guy planned everything so the rookies would protect young Oscar efficiently without even realizing they were being manipulated. He smiles, satisfied, thinking he managed to ditch the government spies while also securing the safety of an important heir. Walking back down the car aisle, he subtly passes by Isabel, who is carrying a very heavy suitcase. The blonde heiress continues on her way with her head down, wearing a serious, thoughtful expression, paying zero attention to the guy. Sitting in her luxury compartment, she rests her face on her hand, lost in thought, watching the trees pass by at high speed through the window. A young servant tries to comfort the young lady, telling her not to worry since her father always acted to protect their honor. But in a quick, aggressive reaction, the blonde girl slaps the young man's hand away with force, showing her deep annoyance. Isabel glares at him with her eyes glowing an intimidating shade of blue, commanding that useless fool to shut his mouth immediately. The servant feels quite embarrassed and tries to stammer an apology, but she coldly orders him to get out of her sight right now. She calls him a fool while watching the young servant leave the area with his head down, looking thoroughly frightened. Upon closing the luxury compartment door, the man assumes a suspicious, mysterious stance, showing he is hiding a dark secret. The young servant closes the door with intense anger, revealing sharp teeth and a look of wild hatred for being humiliated. The express train that departed from Saint Madeleine station continues its noisy journey, rattling all the passengers inside. The railway passes through an extremely dangerous region very close to the old front lines of battle against the demon forces. Due to the constant danger, most of the route is considered a military zone heavily guarded by government forces. Ivan mentally studies the map, knowing that out of 30 stations on the route, only 3 are suitable for a terrorist ambush. The first section of the railway was the ideal spot for a surprise attack, but the train passed straight through without a single incident. The second section was also perfect for violent action by mounted bandits, but the night proceeded in total and absolute silence. Given all this suspicious calm, the experienced prota prepares himself, keeping his black pistol loaded right under his coat. Now, the transport approaches the third and final dangerous stretch, and Ivan's blue eyes glow intensely in the dark of the car. The silence inside the passenger car remains way too peaceful, while people sleep and rest quietly in their seats. The hero grows quite intrigued by the absolute stillness, starting to suspect that something very wrong is about to happen. He questions if he messed up his plot prediction, since the classic tutorial always involved a terrorist attack on the train. The prota tries to decipher the logic of this bizarre world, wondering if the appearance of that red beast was just a pure coincidence. A terrifying, eerie doubt creeps into his mind as he considers that this story might not be a standard Academy romance after all. Ivan falls into desperation, wondering if this cursed medieval fantasy world even has a planned happy ending for its characters. Suddenly, people start running frantically through the cars, screaming in panic about a bearded man pointing a gun at them. He ponders if the ending of that story was crafted exclusively for the original hero, and if the legendary warrior simply went back home. With eyes glowing a frosty blue shade, the hero questions what would happen to the inhabitants of this world who were forgotten. The former Korean student pops into his thoughts, making the guy question what his own ultimate fate here would be. The locomotive releases a massive cloud of dark smoke, cutting through the cold night wind as it approaches imminent disaster. The prota clenches his hands tightly, feeling deep hatred for being stuck in this terrible world he so desperately wants to escape from. His greatest desires are to abandon this exhausting life of combat, lie down on a soft bed in his old home, and forget all his problems. He mentally screams in frustration at being trapped in a medieval reality where basic concepts of leisure and comfort do not even exist. Consumed by desperation and an uncontrollable urge to go home, the former Kim Sun-woo feels a suffocating agony in his chest. But suddenly, a terrifying crash causes the prota's eyes to widen in surprise as he gets snapped out of his thoughts. The image of his old life shatters like glass, violently breaking the illusion of peace inside his mind. An explosion of overwhelming magic consumes the entire passenger car, sending flaming debris flying in every direction. The violent impact destroys the train's iron walls, and the scorching heat of the flames quickly consumes the locomotive's structure. The force of the blast is so absurd, it splits the express train in half in a massive fireball, illuminating the dark night. The destroyed cars begin plunging toward the immense mountain ravine, scattering flames and smoke across the entire forest. As the former Korean student fades from his thoughts, Isabel screams in desperation while falling amidst the terrible disaster. Ivan Petrovich takes control of the situation, freezing his emotions to act with the cold precision of a true professional. His body and mind turn as cold as Krasilov's worst winter as he leaps toward the debris plunging through the air. Acting quietly and meticulously, the guy realizes his prediction was correct and that the cursed tutorial is still active. The fearless warrior dives gracefully through the sky under the full moon toward the car where Isabel is falling. He wears a determined combat expression, knowing he needs to save the girl to finally reach the story's conclusion. The wreckage of the express train slams violently into the forest floor, generating a massive cloud of smoke and dust at the site. Silence returns eerily to the valley as smoke from the flames slowly drifts between the shattered cars. In the midst of all that terrible destruction, Isabel regains consciousness with great difficulty, letting out a weak groan of pain. The young blonde girl opens her eyes slowly, trying to understand what happened, and encounters a heartbreaking scene beside her. Her faithful servant, whom she humiliated so much, is right there, shielding her body with his own life while coughing up a lot of blood. She falls into a state of total shock upon realizing the severity of the young man's injuries, who sacrificed himself to keep her alive. Face covered in blood and pinned under heavy wreckage, the young servant looks at his lady, relieved to see she is okay. Isabel remembers how she always treated the guy with extreme coldness and arrogance throughout the entire trip they took together. The girl desperately asks why he did something so foolish for someone who always showed so much hatred for his presence. Bleeding heavily, the servant begs her to run away immediately, explaining that the mysterious enemies were after her. The blonde girl laments, calling the guy a fool and asking why he risked everything to save such a cold person. She says her father would not care about her death, but the young man replies that she does not understand the true reason behind his action. With eyes brimming with tears, the hero's heiress listens to the last emotional confession of that loyal servant. He smiles with difficulty, revealing he never wanted to catch her father's attention, but rather to protect the hero's daughter, whom he cared for deeply. The young noble believes Isabel represents the last hope left behind by the legendary hero Maximilien in this world. Beneath the wreckage of the terrible crash, the girl cries, trying to hold her dying protector's hands in sheer desperation. Deanne smiles faintly with the last of his strength, trying to reassure the young lady, but his body can no longer hold out, and he collapses unconscious. Suddenly, Ivan's commanding voice emerges from the darkness, praising the servant's unshakable loyalty in the face of all that tragedy. Without exerting the slightest effort, the hero lifts the heavy iron debris from the car, leaving the blonde girl completely stunned. Ivan approaches the two injured survivors, formally asking the young man for his true knightly name. The young man weakly introduces himself as Deanne August and asks back who the powerful man who just saved their lives is. The prota looks at him seriously, asking if he wishes to stay alive, and the wounded man whispers a confirmation that he does if possible. Without wasting time, Ivan pulls a small vial of healing potion from his belt and nimbly removes the cap from the magic liquid. Holding the glowing green liquid, the experienced warrior gives a stern warning that the regeneration process is going to hurt immensely. In Isabel's mind, she tried to hold on to the memory that Diane endured all that insane potion pain with an iron will. But reality was quite different, with the guy screaming in pain, begging to be put down and spilling all the kingdom's secrets to Ivan. His desperation was so absurd, he started screaming in agony for his lady's name, leaving Isabel thoroughly dumbfounded. He screams that if she were not the hero's daughter, he would never be going through this, and the annoyed blonde girl delivers a violent strike to him. The punch lands squarely on Diane's face, sending him flying and comically spitting saliva in the middle of the clearing. Diane ends up suffering a mental regression from the shock, calling out for his mother, while Ivan tells Isabel to reflect on her aggressiveness. Ivan warns that the enemies from the mountain will be coming down soon and orders her to carry the wounded man while he takes care of eliminating the threat. Proudly, the girl draws her beautiful silver sword and firmly asserts that she is also capable of fighting alongside him on the battlefield. However, the war veteran notices Isabel's hands are shaking with fear as she grips the heavy weapon's handle. He says her strength is good but unnecessary, making the girl furious for speaking to her with such informality without even knowing her. The guy ignores the complaint, remarking to himself that her personality took after her mother's, and she asks if he knows her father. Without answering, Ivan orders her to gather the crash survivors, light a fire, and use the destroyed train benches to keep warm. At that, Isabel asks indignantly if he really plans to hunt down the enemies alone in the forest without even knowing who they are. Ivan slowly turns his back, replying with his classic coldness that such a detail is not something for her to worry about either. The prota moves toward the dark forest with total confidence, focused solely on his next secret military tactic. He recalls military doctrine teaching that in combat, a warrior must always assume the second worst option and act for the best. The rule sounds so obvious it almost makes one laugh, but its true meaning reveals itself in actual battlefield practice. A good fighter knows the opposing army will always try to execute an attack in the most difficult and problematic way possible. Knowing about the express train derailment, the enemies expect the few survivors to desperately try fleeing through the woods. To avoid a deadly pursuit, the best defensive tactic is to place the target right in the most visible spot to draw the enemy's attention. As soon as they spot the lit fire, the scouts scattered throughout the forest will halt their search to begin the siege. The moment the enemies reorganize to surround the signal's location is when the prota's real fun begins. The hidden meaning behind that military advice is much simpler than today's rookies and spies could ever imagine. If the opponents in front of you are the absolute worst nightmare possible, you must also become the worst nightmare to them. In short, the best defense is delivering the exact type of surprise strike your opponents would least want to face in their lives. Ivan uses his elite pistol marksmanship technique to fire and pick off enemies with pinpoint precision from a distance. The henchmen carrying torches in the dark forest panic completely as they see their companions falling without warning. They begin screaming in fear that the group is being attacked by an invisible sniper, desperately trying to figure out where the shots are coming from. Taking advantage of the frightened enemy's obvious distraction, the hero moves with feline agility through the tree shadows. In a dense, pitch-black forest like that, carrying a lit torch is basically painting a massive target on your own body. Ivan appears out of nowhere, delivering a brutal hatchet blow to the head of one enemy, leaving the others in absolute terror. One of the survivors tries to point his pistol, screaming frantically for the hero to pass away, but it is already too late for him. With a single, precise hatchet strike, the experienced warrior cuts the opponent's weapon clean in half along with his head. Moving like a true reaper in the shadows, he takes down the remaining henchmen with precise, lethal movements in the dark. The guy wipes the blood off the blade and sheathes his favorite combat weapon on his belt with the calmness of someone who just finished a simple task. Ivan lets out a sigh of relief, surveying the pile of defeated opponent bodies scattered across the damp floor of the thick woods. He reloads his black pistol coldly, remembering that a well-executed surprise attack allows a single man to neutralize a whole group. With gunshots echoing through the forest, the enemy bodies pile up quickly on the ground, demonstrating the hero's devastating power. At the enemy camp, a terrified soldier reports that the search party was completely sliced up by a mysterious hatchet. The group's enemy leader is a terrifying demon with massive horns who deduces the team is facing a heavily armed elite force. The demon focuses his sharp hearing on the distant crashes, identifying that the shots are coming from the west and north. He notices the gunshots are slowly drawing closer to his current position, wondering if the enemy actually knows where he is. Losing patience with all that confusion, the captain orders his frightened subordinate to hand over his pistol immediately. He points the weapon upward and fires a loud shot, leaving his henchman quite confused by the sudden action. After the test, the enemy boss sees through the trick, concluding with hatred that their army is actually facing just one man. The subordinate tries to argue, saying that is impossible given the large volume of gunshots, but the leader tells him to shut up. The scene reveals several tripwires stretched across the forest, triggered when an unsuspecting soldier's foot snags them. A pistol tied to a branch fires on its own, taking out an enemy, revealing that the dead men's own weapons were used as booby traps. The demon captain roars in anger, realizing all the shots they heard earlier actually came from their own weapons lost in the woods. The poor henchman stands completely speechless and trembling, realizing they fell like sitting ducks for the prota's brilliant tactic. The wire trap setup created by the hero was so efficient, it eliminated the enemy scouts without him needing to expose himself to danger. The demon understands the hero tested their awareness and used the search party's own haste to lead them straight to their demise. The henchman wonders if the hero's daughter could plan something so brutal on her own, while the leader grows thoughtful about the legend. He recalls the overwhelming power of the legendary Maximilian, thinking that even if the daughter has half his strength, she would still be a monster. Determined to end the issue, the captain orders all remaining troops to gather to surround and capture the forest intruder. He announces he will move alone from that point on, leaving the subordinate thoroughly terrified of having to lead the other rookies. A bird flies off, startled through the night sky, as another loud gunshot echoes between the dark trees of that immense forest. At the makeshift camp, the surviving passengers tremble in fear around the campfire, while Deanne continues crying like a baby. Isabel tries to maintain her composure, asking the warrior to get a grip, but he just rambles silly things about fireflies. Suddenly, the girl hears heavy steps approaching the clearing, her eyes widening on maximum alert, sensing danger. The terrifying demon captain emerges from the shadows, frightening all the civilians, who begin running frantically for cover. Carrying a giant sword, he formally introduces himself as an elite officer of the Imperial Army, ready to fulfill his duty. The demon stares at the blonde girl with his overwhelming red aura, asserting he will make a point of defeating the hero's daughter with his own hands. The full moon shines majestically in the cold night sky, illuminating the imminent deadly clash about to unfold in the clearing. Meanwhile, in the woods, Ivan does the math, realizing the enemy forces deployed total exactly 50 well-trained men. The guy coldly draws his sharp, blood-stained hatchet, preparing to finish off the remaining opponents in the woods. He observes the fallen bodies around him, concluding with satisfaction that this part of his tactical plan is practically wrapped up. With extreme composure, the prota wipes the blade and stores his preferred weapon on his belt, focusing entirely on his upcoming thoughts. His reflections grow increasingly confused, because if this story were truly a regular academy romance, everything would be vastly different. The start of the main character's school year should be the classic tutorial, but the current difficulty level is absurdly exaggerated. He remembers that the tutorial for the heiress Essadisi was extremely simple, to the point where he managed to solve it with one hand tied behind his back. But Isabel's case feels like a complete nightmare, since escaping a train buried by a landslide is already a major logical issue. To make matters worse, right after escaping, an elite squad appears out of nowhere to attack before the game even teaches the basic battle system. As if that were not enough, the stage boss is a powerful monster, capable of reading targeting lines, producing an inevitable game over screen. Some games feature mandatory losses in the tutorial, but those men were acting with the genuine intent to assassinate the poor girl. Unless a game-controlled support character stepped in to save the day, the blonde girl's fate would be sealed right there. Ivan stops walking, stunned upon realizing that the support character sent by fate to save the day is actually himself. He falls into desperation, thinking that if he is just an unimportant side character who does not even show up in the credits, he will never be able to go back home. The hero ponders if there really is no happy ending reserved for him, and if he will have to remain trapped forever in this cursed world. He focuses on two major problems: understanding the reason for the absurd difficulty, and finding out if the girl passes away without his interference. With his face stained with blood, the guy makes a firm decision, concluding there is only one real way to test the rules of this world. He climbs up onto a high branch and watches the camp from a distance, prepared to witness Isabel's fight against the horned demon. Before the campfire, the demon captain mockingly tells the blonde girl he prepared thoroughly simply because she is the great hero's daughter. The monster smiles cynically, showing off his sharp fangs, stating flatly that when all is said and done, the legendary heiress is way too weak. Even seeing the blonde girl shaking with rage and fear as she wields her sword, Ivan decides to keep his cool posture and watch the fight from afar. He swears to himself he will not step into the fight under any circumstances, even if the blonde girl ends up losing her life in that brutal clash. Isabel lets out a furious battle cry and lunges forward, delivering a swift strike that collides against the enemy captain's massive black blade. The demon blocks the attack effortlessly, mocking her by saying she acts like a diligent student who simply memorized fighting manuals. He pushes his blade, forcing the young girl back while she desperately tries to hold her ground, screaming at him to shut up. The civilians watch the scene in panic, seeing the proud heiress of the hero getting easily cornered by the terrifying demon. The demon shoves her brutally, asserting that swordsmanship is merely the method used to drive a blade into an opponent's flesh. He ridicules the girl, thinking it is a joke that she reached that age without ever facing actual combat in her life. Isabel screams furiously, telling him to shut up, while her eyes glow with an overwhelming blue magic energy. But with a single quick defensive maneuver, the demon captain easily knocks the young girl's silver sword into the air. The weapon lands stuck in the ground at a distance, leaving the hero's heiress completely disarmed and at the mercy of the opponent's final strike. Ipalos laments having lost his soldiers to such a silly, easy fight, looking at the girl lying wounded on the ground. He points the blade directly at her neck, asking coldly if the hero's daughter has any final words before she passes away. On the verge of facing the end, the young blonde girl closes her eyes and silently recalls the ancient teachings of her legendary father. She remembers he always told her not to push herself to become a hero, and that being a hero is a painfully foolish thing. The lesson stated that bravery is what defines a true hero, not just the raw physical power behind their strikes. Meanwhile, Diane stammers through his trance the sacred words of the knightly oath he swore over 10 years ago. He repeats the solemn words he recited before marching off to war, recalling that a knight must accept his own weakness. Even having temporarily lost his mind due to the pain, young Diane keeps that sacred oath stored deep within his heart. He recites that a true protector must always view the world through the eyes of the weak, defending the defenseless with honor. Hearing those words from Diane, Isabel finally accepts her situation, admitting to herself that she really is a weak person. The demon delivers the final swing, but the girl dodges at the very last second, guided by the true understanding of her own weakness. She understands that the real reason to draw a sword is simply to protect what is right to defend in this world. That fighting for good should be something natural, like helping someone in need, while the survivors scream in terror, thinking she was struck. The captain charges with fury, delivering a devastating slash, but the hero's heiress moves with impressive agility. In a spectacular move, she retrieves her silver sword stuck in the ground, a renewed resolve shining in her eyes. Isabel takes a humble, firm stance, executing a flawless counterattack that blocks the demon's massive blade. She understands that doing good is simply her most basic duty as a knight, resolving to fight to protect the survivors. Overcome by a mystical force, her eyes glow intensely, and she raises her weapon, ready to unleash her full wrath upon him. The blonde girl executes a crushing sequence of rapid, glowing slashes that begin breaking through the demon captain's heavy defense. She advances with fierce determination, landing precise strikes that push the opponent back, leaving him unable to react. The enemy boss stands completely shocked, unable to fathom how that weak girl suddenly awakened such terrifying power. With one final perfect maneuver, Isabel lands a devastating diagonal slash that cuts through the monster's chest with extreme precision. The silver blade cuts cleanly through the air, sealing the young warrior's spectacular victory in the middle of the dark clearing. The demon captain's blood sprays high under the light of the full moon, marking the end of that deadly clash that seemed impossible. The monster lets out a weak groan of pain, chuckling subtly as he realizes his fate was sealed by a clean sword strike. He grumbles in surprise that he was wounded first by the father and now by the daughter, pulling the blade from his chest with great difficulty. The demon collapses to his knees on the damp ground of the clearing, his body drained of strength after losing all his blood in that brutal fight. Isabel glares at him sternly, proudly asserting that she is not simply known as the daughter of the legendary hero. She introduces herself with dignity as Isabel, daughter of Maximilian and Marie, earning her own name on the battlefield. The opponent whispers his last words before collapsing completely lifeless onto the ground, bringing an end to the battle. Exhausted, the young girl falls to her knees, breathing heavily after expending every last drop of her magic energy in that fight. Yet despite the extreme exhaustion and body aches, she wears a subtle smile, seeing she fulfilled her noble duty. All the surviving passengers celebrate and embrace emotionally, crying tears of relief for having escaped that tragedy alive. Suddenly, Ivan's voice emerges from the shadows, praising Isabel's flawless performance, startling the girl with his presence. She asks anxiously about the other enemies in the forest, and the Prota walks calmly in her direction. He kicks the horned demon captain's lifeless body, coldly mentioning that monster was the last one left to eliminate. Isabel lies on the ground, laughing weakly and praising the guy's terrifying strength, while he just observes the situation calmly. The hero concludes that the attack was actually the typical early-game awakening event that is part of Isabel's tutorial. He knows that if everything had followed the original script, all the civilians would have passed away cruelly in the train derailment. With that, the blonde girl would have awakened out of hatred and eliminated everyone in the woods, but his intervention saved all the survivors. He realizes that everyone's survival was thanks to his tactical action, proving he is much more than just a simple secondary character. Ivan celebrates in silence, confirming he is not just an NPC controlled by the game and that his existence actually matters here. The veteran recalls the epic moment from the past when the great legendary hero used his absurd strength to split the night sky. He realizes that on that day, what the savior wanted to see by parting the dark clouds of the Demon King's forest was not a mere star. He just wanted to be absolutely sure that the morning star was still shining in the exact same spot as always, to guide everyone. He confesses in his thoughts that he really never liked the original white-haired hero, with only one tiny exception. After all, even after so much time, the memory of Maximilian's confident, reckless smile remains engraved in his mind. The guy notices that the morning star, represented by the hero's daughter, continues to shine beautifully and admirably in the clearing. Now, with a clear mind, the Prota focuses on his main objective, ensuring the safe graduation of all the heirs. To fulfill that promise, Ivan knows he needs to figure out how the demons managed to act so boldly right near the capital. He wants to uncover who the faction leader is and how many undercover monsters are already acting in secret inside St. Yansk University. Isabel watches the hero, letting out a frightened murmur, asking in a trembling voice what on earth he is planning to do in the middle of the valley. Ivan flashes a demonic grin while removing the cap from the healing potion, clearly intending to initiate a terrifying, painful interrogation.